1. The creative force. The decision. The creative force is the very essence of the universe. It is through the creative, acting in time, that the power of the universe is made manifest. It is through this power that all things come into being, whether in the physical world, or in the world of men. Thus, God acts through the creative power in constantly making and remaking the physical universe. All of existence has its beginning in this creative power, which in time manifests itself in the physical world. Man achieves success by aligning himself with this creative power, and allowing it to act through him with its attributes of persistence, endurance, and progress in doing what is in accord with the universe, that is, in doing what is right. Success in the highest sense comes from this alignment with the creative forces of the universe. It is through the creative power that man first conceives his actions, and after that concentrates on carrying them through. And when he follows through in alignment with the Tao, the way of the universe, his actions are imbued with that power, and work their way through time, to bring things to fruition. It is in through this power of focusing on the essentials, that the superior man is able to accomplish great things. It is in this way that a man is shaped by the creative and is able to inspire others. The maxim the creative is always in motion, hence time is its stage upon which it acts out the creative drama. Time is not the enemy, but rather the means. The unceasing movement of time is an expression of the unrelenting power of the creative. The sage uses time to work out and perfect his existence, always focusing upon his objectives and avoiding distractions. 2. The receptive. The decision-devoted assistant may occupy a subordinate position in the eyes of men, but such a person is indispensable to the creative leader, who cannot perform every task and carry to completion every project alone. Often, the assistant has far greater skills in certain areas than the leader, but it is the creative leader who brings all elements together and pushes the entire work to completion, and the assistant needs the leader as much as the leader needs assistance. When both work together in harmony, there is progress and great things can be accomplished. It is only when the assistant resents what appears to men to be a secondary role, becomes envious and wishes to replace the creative element, that conflict and confusion arise and things come to a bad end. But by following the leadership of the creative organizer, and seeking to contribute whatever he can to the joint effort, success can be achieved. Thus, the devoted subordinate finds fulfillment, not in a position of authority, and not one with significant recognition, but in the satisfaction of having contributed in an indispensable way to the successful outcome of a joint endeavor. The assistant does not push himself forward into the limelight, nor does he try to seize the direction of the entire endeavor. Rather, he allows himself to be subject to the guidance of others and focuses his energy on making the endeavor succeed. If necessary, he actively seeks guidance and concentrates on planning and the development of means, so that his work fits into the overall plan. The ultimate goals towards which he contributes, however, are determined by others, not by himself. The maxim the superior man in the role of devoted helper calls upon his highest attributes for the tasks assigned to him: loyalty, perseverance, dependability, and strength, so that he can ably perform his duties. He exhibits great breadth of character. He faces any crisis with assurance, and his motives are pure in that he seeks not his own aggrandizement, but the success of work involving others. Helping those who need assistance requires a sober maturity, friendliness, and even affection. There is a certain selflessness that finds great satisfaction, in helping others succeed with their life and in their endeavors. The devoted assistant finds satisfaction in helping others to accomplish important tasks that he working alone might be incapable of. He is reliable, knowledgeable and hardworking. He can work with and be of assistance to all kinds of people. 3. Initial difficulties. The decision, the time for getting started creates special difficulties. Everything is in a state of confusion, and it is hard to know how to proceed. There are always obstacles at the beginning of any endeavor because beginning something new means disturbing the established ways that everyone has become accustomed to. But this is natural, and occurs every time a man tries to initiate something, to encourage growth and to institute change. The result is always some degree of confusion and chaos at the startup. But if a man persists, the chaos clears up, new ways are established, and the difficulties are overcome. All advancement is accompanied by difficulty. Therefore, the presence of difficulty actually holds promise of success. No great work can be accomplished without a struggle, therefore the man who wishes to accomplish something welcomes this struggle. At the same time, it would be foolish of him to try to advance recklessly. A difficult situation means that everything must be handled with care. Assistance at the beginning should be sought from others and active direction provided them. A leader in a new enterprise must blaze the trail and lend encouragement to his co-workers. It is his task to bring order out of confusion by plotting strategy and organizing resources. This requires skill in identifying problems, setting goals, and explaining those goals to others. 4. Youthful indiscretion. The decision acts of indiscretion and folly are characteristic of youth, but unfortunately not confined to the young. The young man, being inexperienced, has no background of past experiences to provide him with practical wisdom, and thus is likely to approach everything as a novice. He will often take unwise and unnecessary chances in the face of dangerous situations, or he may make repeated inquiries, when sufficient information is already available to him to make a decision, if he will only study that information carefully. Lacking knowledge and experience is not a vice, but the inexperienced person should endeavor to find a trustworthy teacher, and should cultivate the right attitude towards that teacher. This means that he should learn first of all to be receptive and not to resist instruction. This does not mean that he should believe everything that everyone tells him, but he should recognize his own lack of knowledge and actively seek to understand what he is told and explore it fully, before turning away from it or arrogantly asserting his own conclusions. A wise teacher will wait for his instruction to be sought. He only wastes his time and does nothing for the inquirer if he tries to force learning upon an arrogant, doubtful and resistant inquirer. In fact, if anything, he only provides the arrogant inquirer an opportunity to practice his ignorance, and make it more firmly rooted. If the inquirer is argumentative, and only asserts his own limited knowledge instead of seeking to understand what the teacher has to offer, the wise teacher dishonors himself if he even tries to respond. But if the inquirer diligently seeks to understand the teacher, not to assert his own opinions, and works toward his own enlightenment, then success is possible. A man's mind has no room for the teachings of others, if it is filled with his own ideas. The maxim, the individual who honestly seeks to improve his own understanding will do so by thoroughly examining himself, humbly becoming aware of his lack of knowledge rather than focusing on the knowledge he already has, and carefully identifying and investigating every facet of the area of his inquiry. He should not hurry along, but should dwell on every aspect of his inquiry until he is sure of his grasp of the whole. Not until all areas of uncertainty have been eliminated should he move on. 5. Waiting patiently the decision. There is a danger to be overcome, but it would be a mistake if one tried to rush into things. Those things that nature and fate bring must be awaited with patience. Nature cannot be rushed. Destiny unfolds in her own time. Not every occurrence is within the power of man. The man of strength, confident in the workings of the natural, waits with patience, but the weak man becomes anxious and agitated, loses patience and acts prematurely. This proper kind of waiting is not merely wishful thinking, because the man attuned with nature has the inner certainty that things will come about. Moreover, his confidence enables him to plan for and work towards a favorable outcome, and this enables him to be successful when events finally do turn favorable. Thus these three elements, patiently waiting, planning for the future, and diligently preparing for the eventual favorable outcome, not only help bring about good fortune, but also enable the man to accomplish great things. Really great things cannot be accomplished if the time is not ripe, nor can they be done with casual preparation. Impatience leads a weak man to jump ahead without proper preparation. But a strong man surveys the field before him with his eyes on where he wants to go, and this enables him to take the proper steps in the order which they should be taken, and to stick with his plan in order to accomplish his goal. All of this also implies that he is perfectly honest with himself, that he faces squarely the course of action that lies before him, and that he then acts firmly and resolutely to bring these things about, all in their proper time. With this kind of patience, foresight and preparation, success is assured. The maxim confident in his abilities and in the movement of fate, the man of strength does all that is necessary and then relaxes, as he awaits the unfolding of events. He has no need for worry or anxiousness, because he knows that events will work themselves out in their own time, and with whatever diligent effort as is necessary. He knows that trying to force things forward can only lead to failure, so he takes his ease and cheerfully allows fate to unfold. 6. Conflict. The decision conflict arises when a superior man is opposed by associates who are deceitful and strong-willed. These people oppose him and block his every attempt to progress. The only resolution to the conflict is some kind of compromise, and a man should always be alert for ways to settle the differences. Even when one is right and those in opposition are wrong, continuing the conflict only brings injury to all concerned, because both sides become entrenched and unyielding. When this happens, the conflict continues endlessly, and eats away at the ability to work together on anything. Such a conflict can be settled by putting the matter before someone whom both sides respect, someone who will find a middle ground. As long as the conflict remains, however, it is not possible to accomplish anything significant, and it is better to bring everything to a halt until the conflict is settled. Great accomplishments require that people work together if success is to be achieved. Division and opposition within cause a dissipation of energy and prevents concerted action. If a man tries to push ahead in the face of conflict, he is almost sure to fail. The maxim conflicts can be prevented if the interests of opposing sides are taken into consideration from the very beginning. If there is a potential for conflict, it is important that those whose interests are likely to clash divide up the overlapping responsibilities fairly at the start, so that each person understands his rights and is clear on what he is expected to do. When duties are carefully and justly assigned, conflicts are less likely to arise. 7. The army. The decision A group of people represent an enormous amount of force that can be dangerous if it is not carefully controlled. At heart, this dangerous force is capable of anything, but it must be kept under strict discipline if it is to accomplish something worthwhile. Therefore, the leader of a group of people must be the strongest, most important element, and everyone else must be subordinate to him. Everything depends upon his strength as an organizer and planner, and his vision of the goals of the enterprise. He leads, not by brute force, but by the force of his personality, which inspires his people with enthusiasm. To do his job, he must be entrusted by the governing authority with the power of his office and complete responsibility for what he seeks to accomplish. Any concerted effort, if led by someone not up to the task, can lead to catastrophic results. Therefore, it is important that the leader of such a group exercise his powers with care and discretion. A good leader does not expect blind obedience to his directives. As much as reasonably possible, he should explain the goals and tasks that lie ahead so that the people he leads fully understand the danger, the reasons why certain actions will be taken, and the results being sought. When a people fully understand the purpose of their mission, they can act in individual ways to promote the success of the concerted effort. People cannot give their fullest attention and effort to an aim they do not understand, and they cannot be unified in their effort if each individual has a different idea about its purpose. By taking his people into his confidence in this way, the leader also helps prevent this dangerous force, this basically unruly mass of people, from getting out of hand and pursuing destructive ends. Above all, the group must pursue rightful ends in a rightful way. Moral rightness is as important with groups of people as it is with individuals. The maxim "the potential for great power exists in masses of people even when it is not apparent, even when the individual members go about their ordinary tasks. They stand ever ready to be marshaled into a directed force, as needed for carrying out great undertakings." The leader of such a mass of individuals must be one who is loved and respected. A people who live under fair and just direction become strong, because such conditions provide them with room for each to develop as strong individuals. Their well-being and happiness are an essential ingredient, because their best functioning is essential to the whole, just as the benevolence of the whole is essential to their best functioning. 8. Holding together. The decision a strong man in a leading position brings people together, so that they can form a community and successfully work with one another. While the man is the central figure of the whole group, he is also a part of the group. The group needs him, just as he needs the group, in order to accomplish what must be done, and a bond is formed. Although some tasks can be done by individuals working alone, most really great endeavors require the working together of large groups of people. Different people, all possessing different skills, can complement one another and provide an array of usable skills that no single person can possess. This cannot happen, however, unless there is a person at the center who coordinates and directs the entire enterprise, and that person must be well qualified for the position of leadership. Being the center of the activity of a large number of people is a serious responsibility, and requires vision and understanding, a magnanimous spirit, a steady sense of fairness and justice, and physical endurance. These are exceptional abilities, and the individual who aspires for this position of leadership should inquire of the oracle once again, to be sure, that he is qualified for the job. Anyone who is not fully qualified to be the center of a great endeavor will cause those associated with the enterprise to have a sense of futility, and prevent a more effective effort from taking place, and that in turn will probably make things worse than they are now. If an inept attempt becomes by default the only attempt, it were better that no attempt at all be made. But a well-organized program will attract competent people, who might otherwise hesitate to associate with a wasteful and futile attempt. Moreover, it is important that a good team be formed at the beginning so that members will have a complete understanding of the development of the enterprise, and will participate in the evolution of the group. A group working together develops skills as a group. Persons coming too late will find themselves outside the loop, and may not be able to catch up. All members of the group understand the group's purpose. But if a person has that understanding, and is nevertheless not really qualified to lead the group, he should step aside and leave that job to someone else. He could serve as an irregular member, or perhaps he could join some other group. The maximum social groups are able to stay together, because each person feels himself a part of the group and shares with other members a common interest in all efforts to keep the group going. A true leader helps all members feel that the group's interests are their interests, and that they need the group just as the group needs them. This commonality of interests provides strength to the group, and makes it a meaningful part of the lives of each member. It is this kind of beneficial interaction between members that enriches the lives of all. 9. Small taming. The decision even the small and seemingly insignificant can have the power to restrain and control great forces, but such restraint is a very delicate matter, and requires great finesse in order to pull it off. It is not a time for significant action using great force, because great force is being held in check by the prevailing powers. Therefore, a person must use the only things available to him: gentle persuasion, good humor, and diplomacy. This does not mean the situation is hopeless; in fact, it is filled with potential. But the obstacles are too great, and the forces arrayed against oneself are overwhelming. It is not a time for beginning a grand new project. Nevertheless, some success is possible using modest means and convincing reason, but it is not possible to exercise direct control over outcomes. This requires a strong inner constitution intensely focused on the goal, but a gentle outward manner that is inoffensive and conciliatory. The maxim "there comes a time when a man can have but little effect upon the outside world." He no longer has great influence, and his attempts at moving forward are met by the negative responses of his associates. Rather than waste his substance in repeated, futile efforts to force his way ahead, the superior man pauses and directs his attention to refining his character through quiet reflection. If association with others is generally unproductive, he enjoys moments alone in quiet. 10. Proper conduct. The decision a person who must deal with another who is much stronger, or in a much stronger position than he, avoids the danger that such a relationship naturally suggests by behaving good-naturedly. He may need to place demands on the stronger person, but by doing it with good humor, the stronger person is amused and not offended, and takes it all in good humor. A genuinely strong person, who is aware of his strength, does not feel threatened by a weaker person, even when that weaker person importunes upon him. Only insulting and presumptuous actions evoke his anger. Therefore, a weaker person approaching a stronger person with pressing needs may find himself in a dangerous position and unable to force the stronger to comply, but he can obtain, what he asks of the stronger by presenting his case honestly and straightforwardly, and with proper respect and conduct. There is no question in anyone's mind that the stronger could crush the weaker without hardly exerting himself, if he so chose. But the weaker avoids that fate by keeping in mind his lesser status, and by bridging that gap with a pleasant attitude. The maxim when differences of status or position are inherent in the nature of things, no conflict arises. Men can never be equal in every respect, and men will naturally differ in every possible attribute. But difference in rank, status, or position within a society must never be arbitrary or based on favoritism or on an assignment using unfair or unrelated criteria. If it is inevitable that resentment and conflict shall arise. But if a difference in rank is based on merit or inner worth, then people everywhere recognize that the difference is based on criteria that are fair, rational and reasonable, and they readily accept it. 11. Peace. The decision a time of peace and harmony is conducive to advancement and prosperity. As in spring, all things work together to bring about robust growth. Dissensions evaporate as persons of different status are able to work together in mutually beneficial relationships. When the wise and enlightened are in control, even evil forces fall under their influence, and are able to make improvements. Men's passions are ameliorated in such times, and their attention is turned toward worthy objectives. All that is inferior is pushed into the background, and the superior, taking advantage of the harmonious times, are able to operate freely. This produces a time of good fortune and progress. When men are able to work in harmony and cooperate with one another, they are able to plan and organize their time and efforts in ways that are highly productive. Progressive ideas are welcome. Cooperative ventures are embraced. The abundance that occurs in a time of peace and harmony is directed towards proper ends, and resources are utilized efficiently. It is this harmonious relationship with even the forces of nature that produces great abundance, prosperity and success. 12. Stand still. The decision in a time of inactivity, the harmony necessary for the creative powers to function properly is not present. Any actions taken in such a time will be unproductive and futile. There is a time and a season for all things, and this is not the time for great accomplishments. Nothing seems to work, everything is in disarray. All the forces that promote creative activity are absent. Inferior people are gaining power, and the superior man is ignored and without influence. What is a superior man to do in such a time? Shall he become a part of the general level of inferior activity? Shall he throw in his lot with everyone else? No, never. In such a time of decadence and decline, the superior man retires from the current scene. He holds on to his principles and awaits a time that is more conducive to their implementation, when his influence can have some effect. The maxim when inferior people are in ascendancy, there is a surge of pointless, meaningless, inane activity that is all display, that has no depth and no significance. Men do not trust one another, because they intuitively recognize the inferiority of others. The superior man may be invited to participate in this folly, but he should decline, no matter how enticing the offer. He knows that he can have no real influence on what proceeds, and to attempt to do so would only put him in conflict with the others. He would only waste his energies and demean himself. Therefore, he works on his own development in solitude rather than waste his substance in pointless pretense. 13. Fellowship. The decision a man with an accommodating nature can bring intractable men together into a peaceful union, by acting as a source of clear vision. Such a union has great strength, because it combines the purpose and vision of a quiet and modest fomenter with the capabilities of strong and competent performers. With such a union of personnel, great things can be accomplished and dangerous tasks brought to a successful conclusion. Men with such strong, independent dispositions cannot be united except for purposes that are important and beneficial to mankind. The leader of such a group cannot appeal to such people with purposes centered around himself, but must have goals that are transcending things, that inspire men to give their very best to a higher calling. The leader of such a group, therefore, must be dedicated, inspiring, and with a vision that exceeds the ordinary. He must be able to light a fire under men, not with deception or false appearances, but with real insight and discernment. His is a quiet strength, however, because the people he works with are not fools, but hard-nosed realists themselves. He cannot make headway with them, unless he is able to reveal to them a direction that they can agree with unquestionably. The maxim a group of competent people working together cannot attempt difficult tasks, and accomplish great goals casually or incidentally. Any group of competent people has individuals with different and varying skills. Any complicated task that is attempted requires an array of abilities that are not found in a single man. If great deeds are to be brought to fruition successfully by a group of people, their varying skills must be coordinated with the different demands of the task. This cannot be left to happenstance, but must be planned and arranged carefully. If every man is expected to help out without being given some kind of direction, no great task can be accomplished. Competent men recognize the need for organized effort, and look to the person in charge to supply it. 14. Great possession. The decision a person in a high position, who is modest, attracts to himself people of great ability. They come to him, because they know that their voices will be heard and their contributions can be effective. An arrogant, immodest person attracts sycophants who seek only their own advancement, and care little for great accomplishment, save as it advances their own interests. But a modest person can bring together great talents who have clear vision, and they can then unite to produce real advancement. Great men do not submit to tyrannical leadership, neither do they wish to enhance the pride of an autocrat. Only a leader, who will permit them to use and express their own great abilities, can win their allegiance. Such a coordinated accumulation of great talent promises the highest degree of success possible. The superior man who is modest becomes a great moral leader. Such a man must deal with matters of both good and evil. He shows direction, not by fight and command, but by his offering of policies that genuinely promote good and stand up against evil. In this way, he brings all actions within the beneficial forces of nature, and this can only promote favorable conditions for all he has influence over. The maxim "the superior man, who is modest, is capable of becoming a great moral leader." In the course of his working with others, such a man must deal with matters of both good and evil. He shows direction, not by fight and command, but by his leadership and policies that genuinely promote good and stand up against evil. In this way, he brings all activities within the beneficial forces of nature, and this can only promote favorable conditions for all over whom he has influence. 15. Modesty. The decision a man who is modest will be honored no matter what his station in life. That which is proud and exalted is in time brought down, and that which is humble and modest is in time recognized and respected. This follows the law of the reduction of extremes, for whenever anything reaches its furthest point, it tends to move in the opposite direction. The fate of men follows a similar law, bringing decline to the proud, and honor to the modest. The same law influences the sentiments of men, for they resent the actions of the boastful, but are kindly disposed towards those who are temperate. The destinies of men are subject to immutable forces, but a man has the power to influence his destiny, by aligning himself with those forces that will be beneficial, and thus bring happy and successful outcomes to his life. Whatever a man attempts to do, if he is modest, he will attract to himself respect and appreciation from decent people. By working quietly and modestly, without drawing attention to himself, a man can accomplish what he wants to do without stirring up resentment and negative feelings. On the other hand, the man who broadcasts his accomplishments, who draws the attention of all to the ways he has been able to advance himself, will find that everyone is disinclined to assist his further advancement, and does everything they can to bring his progress to a halt. The maxim, since it is the law of nature to reduce extremes, the superior man in a position of leadership brings down those things that have gone too far, and brings up those things that have been neglected. In his judgments when allocating resources, he reduces those who have received much, and increases those who have been slighted. In all things, he aims for a moderation that will sustain each one, but none at the expense of another. And if, for good reason, certain elements are temporarily favored, he later favors other elements in order to compensate. Thus, all elements, over time, receive equal nourishment and none have good reason to complain. 16. Enthusiasm. The decision a leader meets with enthusiasm from his subordinates, because they look up to him with honor and respect. He gains their respect, because he understands the people he leads and empathizes with their spirit. It is this mutual respect and understanding that is the basis of their relationship. Enthusiastic following unites men for the performance of great tasks, and prevents pockets of opposition and negativity from arising that might undermine the success of an endeavor. A superior man cannot obtain enthusiastic support for just any measure that he arbitrarily chooses, neither does he evoke enthusiasm simply on the basis of his personal magnetism. Evil men who lead their followers down wrongful paths base their leadership on such personal attraction. But the superior man bases his leadership on his insight into the minds and hearts of those he leads, and he formulates policies and issues directions that are in harmony with their own interests and character. Thus he leads along a path that is natural and agreeable with the forces of heaven and with the best nature of man. When a man is in harmony with these universal forces, he follows the path of least resistance. Contrary to the usual understanding of least resistance, this does not mean he follows an evil path, because it is easier to yield to temptation than to resist it. Rather, this means that the superior man follows the path that is in accord with universal forces, and that does not constantly meet with natural obstructions. It is not a matter of succumbing to personal weaknesses, but of moving ahead and avoiding external obstructions in one's path. The path of least resistance is the one that is favored by natural forces. Rules and regulations that are rightful and in accord with the nature of man find ready acceptance, whereas those that are contrary to what is natural only create resistance and opposition. The maxim a righteous ruler recognizes the social customs of his people and the means of expression for the spirit of the people. People are united together by unseen forces, whether in music or in religious observances or in any other social activities that enable the whole people to express their enthusiasm and devotion. A leader encourages such sentiments and participates in them himself. Such exercises, by giving expression to the people's spirit and enthusiasm, enable that enthusiasm to intensify the devotion of the people and uplifts their spirit. Great undertakings cannot be accomplished without this unity of spirit and sense of togetherness that participation in social activities and ceremonies creates. Divisiveness and opposition are eliminated by such activities in which all participate. The sharing of emotional experiences has a unifying effect. 17. Following. The decision a man induces others to follow him by showing deference and consideration, and by making the occasion a happy and productive one for them. Success comes to him, not from compelling others to follow through force or trickery, nor from focusing on his own needs and wishes, but from adapting himself to the needs and wishes of those he is trying to induce to follow him. It is not a leader's self-interest that attracts others, but his accommodating and satisfying the interest of others, that gives him great influence. It has been said that it is not from the benevolence of the merchant that we obtain the goods he sells, but from his regard to his own interest, but this is true only in a certain limited sense. It is the merchant's ability to adapt his wares to the needs and wants of his customers that cause the latter to visit his shop. He would quickly find himself with few customers indeed, if he offered them only what he wanted, and did not adapt his offerings to what his customers needed and wanted. He who would attract others to follow him must first observe firsthand and clearly what it means to be a follower and to have interests that a leader should enable him to fulfill. Only when such needs of followers are fulfilled will a leader have that enthusiastic agreement that is necessary if they are to follow his leadership. He may think that he can obtain some following by overt or hidden compulsion, and perhaps there are small numbers that will submit to such influence, but most are turned away by underhanded tactics. A general, enthusiastic following is not obtained by such means. Even then, however, success comes from appealing to the needs and wants of people that are conducive to what is truly beneficial to the followers, not what appeals to their baser motives. In all such inducements, there is always the moral element. But when all these conditions are fulfilled, great success will be the outcome. The maxim: the superior man adapts himself to the demands of whatever situation he finds himself in. He recognizes that there is a time for activity and a time for rest, for if he does not take proper rest, he cannot conduct his activities optimally. Periods of rest are as much an adaptation to life's demands as are periods of activity. No man can continue in a prolonged effort with a happy, productive attitude, if he does not allow himself periodic occasions, when he has a change of scenery and a time for recuperation. 18. Work on the decayed. The decision a stagnant situation has developed caused by neglect, carelessness and procrastination. It is necessary to take some sort of positive action in order to remedy the situation. Nevertheless, the prospects are excellent, because whatever deterioration has been caused by a failure to act can be corrected by taking carefully considered steps to undo the results of the neglect. It is necessary, however, to take resolute action. Carelessness was the cause, and carelessness must be eliminated. This is not the sort of thing that can be initiated with little forethought, however. Situations that develop through carelessness invariably have long developed and complicated causes. That being so, it is necessary to plan carefully the corrective measures, and calculate the steps necessary to undo the messy situation with particular attention to its causes. Then, once corrective measures are begun, it is necessary to follow up on the remedy and make sure that the careless ways that caused the problem in the first place have not returned. Carelessness and neglect are matters of habit, and habits are not eradicated at a single stroke. Constant attention over a long period of time is necessary, before the care and effort that should have been employed all along now becomes habitual. The good news is that it can be done. It is not an impossible situation. The maxim "the superior man becomes a leader of others" in two ways. He not only identifies weaknesses and decay in the people's attitudes, but he also points the way to a positive path that should be taken. It is not enough merely to criticize and to point out faults and wrongdoings, although that should not be neglected either. But the superior man must do more than just condemn. He must also outline a better way that will replace what he has criticized. All human actions are capable of being improved, and it is often easy to criticize and point out the need for improvement. But devising an actual program of improvement is much more difficult. Encouraging people to adopt the improvements and providing positive reinforcement requires much more insight and ability, as well as a friendly attitude that is supportive of people when they take the necessary steps to improve. 19. Approach. The decision "a time of expansion" holds promise of blossoming into a period of greatness in which a superior man works closely with others and is able to lead them into a time of joy, peace and progress. Although the times are favorable, it is still necessary to work diligently in order to take advantage of the favorable times, because they will not continue indefinitely. Right now is the opportune time to pursue an important project. Others are receptive to new ideas, and will join in and help. Personal growth is favored. After the good times have run their course, there will be an inevitable decline of fortunes and a change to a time of no progress. But if the man proceeds with energy and determination in an effort to accomplish as much as he can right now, recognizing that less propitious times are down the road, he can be prepared for the inevitable change and not be suddenly overtaken by it. If one is prepared for a decline of fortune, the impact will be less severe. Just as autumn follows spring and summer, so the fortunes of men flourish and then decline. But if, like the squirrel and other beasts, one prepares for the coming change of seasons, it will be easier to endure. The maxim "a superior man is always ready to give of himself, and to nourish and teach those about him." This he does, not because it adds to his sense of importance, but because he genuinely cares for them, and feels joy in witnessing their success. He has genuine compassion and concern for all of humanity, and receives satisfaction from helping others to improve themselves, and to find a better life. Because it provides so much joy to him to do this, he is without limits in his efforts on behalf of others. 20. Contemplation. The decision "a superior man" serves as a leader and as a model of how to think and act to all associated with him. He takes this responsibility seriously, and carefully studies the laws of rightful action and the nature of man in order that his conduct will be always correct. He realizes that others look up to him, therefore he seeks to set a good example. Whatever he does with the utmost honesty and sincerity. It is this high level of integrity that most impresses those associated with him. Even if they do not agree with everything he does, they recognize that his intentions are invariably honest. Although the task is fraught with great difficulty, he seriously contemplates the life of man in this universe and wherein consists rightful action. It is this desire to look deeply into the nature of things that causes his influence to be as powerful as it is, and enables him to produce a beneficial effect in the lives of all around him. He, in addition, applies his full attention and concentration towards developing himself, and this enables him to penetrate deeper and deeper into the meaning of life, and to express that meaning in the conduct of his own life. Without doing anything directly to affect others, his concentration has a profound effect upon them merely through his living example. The maxim "the superior man mingles with people, and does not hesitate to join with them in the ordinary course of living." He observes people how they live, how they act, what motivates them not, in order to control them or to influence them, but to understand them and to see into their hearts. But inevitably, his associating with them does have a great influence. He is enriched by associating with other people, but they are also enriched by his moving amongst them. His influence comes, not from anything specific he says or does, but from the totality of his presence. 21. Breaking through. The decision and obstacle that stands in the way of the harmony that should characterize a group's activities must be forcefully eradicated. Only then can the work of the group proceed to a successful conclusion. Obstacles to group unity are not caused by outside forces, but by persons within the group who sow discord. Such persons do not genuinely support the group's mission, and seek to discredit those who do. Persons of such a caliber have no place in the group, and the longer they remain, the more confused and demoralized the group will become. Moreover, these persons are not likely to leave of their own accord. They feel within themselves a sense of power in being able to disrupt the group, and to stand in the way of an effective organization. They pretend that they are doing what is right, but in truth they have no positive program. They are nothing more than obstructionists, and unless they are removed immediately, they will end up doing permanent harm to the group. Indeed, they may cause the disintegration of the group and the complete failure of its mission. Therefore, the strongest measures are called for, in order to bring their opposing actions to an end. Nevertheless, these strong measures must be taken with fairness and justice. Physical violence or verbal attacks would exceed what is necessary, whereas a mere private discussion of the problem with the offenders would provide them with the opportunity to justify their actions, and continue their disruptive behavior. What is needed is a combination of the two in which a full and outspoken explanation is combined with resolute action. This accords with the nature of the leader, who should be open-minded and friendly to all, but respected for his wisdom and just conduct. The maximum penalties for wrongful acts should be clearly established, suitable to the offense, justly and equally administered, and speedily executed. Laxity in any of these elements undermines the group and breeds disrespect for its organizational integrity. Such carelessness in fact encourages violations, because it suggests that wrongdoing is not seriously opposed by the group, and the reality is, this is true. A social group that cares little about offenses that undermine the purposes of the group, or that do injury to respectable members of the group, is surely a society that is in a state of disintegration and decline. If it continues down this path, the end result can only be chaos and downfall. 22. Grace. The decision work of man is enhanced by its pleasing form, but this is merely a matter of its outward appearance, and should not be considered the essential value. As a general rule, a solution to a problem that has beauty of appearance will also be found to be the one that is well organized and closest to the truth. Beauty of form, therefore, is the mark of successful completion. But if instead it is given the main emphasis, if the appearance is given precedence over the substance, then it defeats the purpose of the enterprise. The power and essential purpose of any intellectual or physical work is the content, not the outward appearance. Unadorned content, however, can be boring and not pleasing to the mind. Thus, outward beauty of form contributes a needed element to the final completion of any human endeavor, and none are really complete without it. But outward beauty of form without essential content is an empty shell, attractive, but false and misleading. Human traditions, religious ceremonies, and national celebrations are enhanced when they are conducted in beautiful surroundings and accompanied with beautiful music and pageantry. But when such ceremonies lose their real significance, and become mere show and empty display, when the celebration becomes of greater significance than the thing celebrated, such beauty is meaningless. There is beauty and symmetry in good speaking and good writing. There is a symmetry, and therefore a beauty, to the way things are ordered in time, so that chaos and confusion are avoided, and all the elements necessary to complete a work are included in their proper order. But all of this is merely the finishing touches to an otherwise solid and substantial work. Nevertheless, if a man brings beauty of form to his works of substance, he becomes capable of doing great things. The maxim beauty of form adds the finishing touches to anything that is done well. But it is a finishing touch, and should never determine the shape of the substantial work it graces. A man knows that his work is well done when it has a beauty of form to it. But he does not add or leave out anything of substance just to make his work appear more beautiful. It is a way of ending things nicely, but it should not be used to determine what the ending will be. It is the essence of proper and civil conduct, but one does not make policy decisions based on which has the nicest appearance. The beauty of quiet contemplation is a necessary part of any man's spiritual journey, but the essential thing is where the contemplation takes him, not the contemplation itself. 23. Splitting apart. The decision, the way by which inferior forces overcome those that are superior, is not through a direct, frontal assault which is not likely to succeed against superior strength, but by working gradually and through stealth to wreck the enterprise from within. If this goes unnoticed for long, the superior forces are eventually weakened and collapse upon themselves. When the times are such that inferior men are in ascendancy, it is inadvisable for the superior man to attempt any great work. The problem is to maintain oneself free from injury, and this is best accomplished by recognizing the bad times, remaining quiet, and waiting for a more favorable time to proceed. This suggests no fault in the superior man. In fact, his fault would be to ignore the signs of the times and forge ahead at any cost, regardless of the lack of favorable circumstances to support his effort. But wisdom is not so foolish and unseeing. Wisdom recognizes that there are times that are not conducive to advancement, and in such times the superior man does not foolishly expend himself, when he knows it will do no good. That would be a complete waste of resources, which is not typical of a superior man. Therefore, he conserves his strength, remains quiet, and waits the development of better opportunities in the future. The maxim, a man occupies a high position, because there are others, sometimes many others, who look up to him for leadership and give him loyalty and support. He, in turn, is dependent upon them, for he cannot do everything himself. They, in effect, are the foundation upon which his position rests. If he withdraws into himself and, whether from pride, ignorance, or self-centeredness, fails to utilize this broad base of support as fully as he might, he denies himself the multiplicity of talents, skills and ideas that a diverse group of interested subordinates can give him. He then runs the risk of not being as effective a manager as he might be, and, indeed, runs the risk of a total failure of the enterprise he heads. Similarly, the people who support him have an equal duty to give their best to the common effort, and put their hearts into the goals of the enterprise. When both conditions prevail, the receptivity of the man in a high place, and the loyalty and support of those in a subordinate position, both the man and his people will make their own prospects secure. 24. Return. The decision a time of new beginnings brings with it an occasion for hope. The old is put behind, and new situations and opportunities present themselves. It is like the emergence of the world into spring. The cold, the darkness, the death-like are all replaced with the bright, the fresh, the lively and the new. New beginnings are always encouraging, because new situations are not tied down and burdened with their past involvements and tangled relationships that had grown fixed and irresolute. Now, with everything new, things may be more easily formed and shaped. One is free to decide on a new course for one's life, and then to see events develop in accordance with these new directions. Such opportunities for starting over are always auspicious, because new situations are much more easily controlled than old. The end of the old is not a loss, but a chance to experience the universe in its endless cycle of becoming. Turn your back on the old. Cut off the dead branches, uproot the dead plants of last year, and nurture the ones emerging now. This is your chance to make a new beginning. It is not necessary to deal with the old and the dead by force. It no longer has power to affect your life, if you will only cut yourself loose. All that is new comes about naturally, without difficulty. All new developments come about through laws of their own existence, and do not require devious or contrived methods. Things fall into place. People form new relationships and explore new avenues of cooperation. Life springs forth anew. But all newly emerging life requires careful nurture at the beginning. By letting things happen naturally, one avoids overexpending the energies that are available. By proceeding with such care, the new beginning can develop into something wholesome and abundant. The maxim life is getting ready to spring forth anew after a period of rest. But all newly emerging life requires careful nurture at the beginning. By letting things rest and then expand naturally, one avoids overexpending the energies that are available. By proceeding with proper care, the new beginning can develop into something wholesome and abundant. 25. Innocence. The decision a man is in a state of natural innocence when he acts without design or contrivance, for it is instinctive in his nature for man to act in accordance with the law of heaven, and to do what is right. His inner nature will cause him to act rightly under all circumstances, if his mind is not corrupted by calculated self-interest. His goodness, then, is intuitive and unintentional, because it is the open and automatic expression of his inner self, not of his conscious mind. The moment he begins to calculate his actions towards outcomes, personal advantages and rewards, innocence ceases to exist. When man's nature is overridden by his desires and his inner spirit is stifled by ambition, he destroys the natural purity of his humanity, and becomes capable of all kinds of evil. and when he finally manages to completely quell this inner voice of innocence, he becomes totally corrupted, for his mind can devise all kinds of justifications for his own self-centered ways. But if he retains this innocence and keeps his spirit pure, it will guide him in all his actions, and bring him supreme success. He will experience the certainty of one who knows what is right and what is wrong without having to make wrenching moral analyses. Whatever he does guided by such a spirit is in accordance with the will of heaven, and attracts good fortune. Not every thoughtless whim comes from an unsullied nature, however. All too often, a man's nature becomes so darkened by self-interest and his baser motives, he is unable to hear the pure voice within. His mind becomes so corrupted that he cannot distinguish between good and evil. But that is good is that which produces good fruits, that serves as a blessing to all that a man touches, that does injury to no man, and that is not calculated solely to produce advantage to the actor, whether real or imagined. Those are the actions that are in accord with the will of heaven and that bring progress and success. The other actions, however, those calculated to produce gain to the disregard and injury of others, may produce some immediate illusory rewards, but everything connected with the means for attaining them produces misfortune in the end. Such a path is not accompanied with the beneficial forces of nature. The maxim nature bestows upon all men those spiritual gifts that assist them to grow and to prosper in their lives, producing an abundance of abilities, talents and skills that benefit themselves and other men, together with a feeling of concern for their mutual benefit that enables them to promote the existence of one another. In a similar fashion, the leaders of men nurture those under their care, promoting their diverse gifts and their opportunities to contribute to society, and thus to develop a broad range of various benefits made available to themselves and to one another. 26. Great taming. The decision creative energy is under contemplative control, and this enables a man to exercise great power. He occupies an important position, but he conducts himself circumspectly and with restraint. This enables him to act and to achieve great works. Because of his seriousness, others look to him for leadership and guidance, and he is able to nurture those who are his responsibility. They, in turn, honor him and rely on his wisdom. With so much energy at readiness, it is important that the man be active and accomplish as much as he can. This requires strength and the ability continuously to look deeply into one's inner self, in order to remain at this high point of power. It requires that the man engage himself with others. Because he is in harmony with the forces of destiny, he is able to accomplish great things. In order to develop his inner self, the man acquaints himself with the wisdom of the past. By studying the words and deeds of ancient sages, he is better able to understand his own times and the motives of other men. Thus, he is able to apply this wisdom in his own life, and in the guidance he gives to others. The maxim: in order to develop his inner self, a man should acquaint himself with the wisdom of the past, which serves as a treasure from which he can draw upon for guidance today. By studying the words and deeds of ancient sages, he is better able to understand his own times and the motives of other men. Thus, he is able to apply this wisdom in his own life, and in the guidance he gives to others, and in this way expand his understanding of wisdom from the pause. 27. Nourishing oneself and others. The decision a man is in a position to enhance his own existence, and that of others, by carefully choosing whom he shall nurture and encourage, and by attending to his own development, by doing all things in accordance with what is right. Every person can be judged by those with whom he chooses to associate and to encourage, and by those elements of his character and personality he chooses to develop. The lives of all men have essential and unessential elements, that is, certain aspects that are vital to their growth and development, and others that are trivial and inconsequential. A wise man does not neglect the essential in order to favor the trivial, neither would he do injury to the most important parts of his development, in order to devote energy to that which is inconsequential. This is what distinguishes a superior man from an inferior one. The superior man focuses his attention on those aspects of his nature that are important, that improve his mind, and that foster the development of his character, whereas an inferior man focuses on silly, inconsequential diversions, that do nothing for his mental or spiritual development, and that do not assist in making him a better person. Nature provides the opportunity for growth and development to all creatures, but it is up to man to choose from all the possibilities available to him which ones he shall focus upon, and that choice determines whether he is an inferior or superior man. A great man pays particular attention to the development of superior men, because it is through them that he can have his greatest influence upon all mankind. He is glad to share with them his understanding, and to answer their questions, and this sharing becomes a model that works for the benefit of all. With inferior men, who ask questions only to display their own inadequate learning, and discuss weighty subjects only to impress others, the great man wastes no time. The maxim "the superior man acts out of a spirit of determined tranquility." He is not indolent, nor uninvolved. He is actively involved in nurturing others, and in fostering their own development along a rightful path. Yet he does this quietly, not forcefully, and bestows his effort on those who are receptive, and can make use of what he has to offer. In a similar manner, the superior man attends to his own character by carefully monitoring his interaction with his environment, that is, by regulating the foods, entertainments, and cultural opportunities he takes in, and by allocating the aid and assistance he gives to others. In all these activities, he endeavors to assure that everything is done carefully and with moderation. It is through such monitoring that he develops his character. 28. Great potential. The decision in a time of great potential, change is imminent and unavoidable. The outcome will be successful, but only if one takes the necessary steps to bring it about. At such a time, existing means are insufficient for accommodating that which is coming into being, and new means or methods must be devised for the drastic change needed. Therefore, action must be taken, and it must be taken immediately. Such actions require an in-depth understanding of the great potential, if things are to be accomplished efficiently and successfully. This requires the best efforts that a person has to give, but the opportunity is auspicious. Times of great potential require a man who is steadfast and willing, if necessary, to stand alone. Such a man will dedicate himself to the great task that is before him, even if it means turning his back on the world itself. His joy is in fulfilling the opportunity which these times present, and the trivial cares and concerns of the world are of far less importance to him now. The maxim "times of great potential require a man who is steadfast and willing, if necessary, to stand alone." Such a man should dedicate himself to the great task that lies before him, and he should be undaunted, even if it means turning his back on the world itself. His joy is in fulfilling the opportunity which these times present, and the judgment of the world should be of far less importance to him at this time. 29. Dangerous situation. The decision a dangerous situation exists that is unavoidable and not the result of the man's doing. By conducting himself carefully and properly, however, the man can extricate himself from the danger. When danger exists for an extended period of time, it is easy for a man to become accustomed to it and to adapt himself, so that he avoids confronting the danger, and remains in the difficult situation indefinitely. This is not good. By remaining in the danger, by compensating for it and adapting to it, a person reduces his own effectiveness, and impairs his ability to succeed. He allows the danger to stop him from doing all that he should do. This will lead eventually to failure. The important thing is to recognize the danger, to understand it fully, to deal with it, and then to move on beyond it, not to linger in it. Only in this way can a man remain true to himself, fully employ his best abilities, and complete with thoroughness what he plans to do. By fully understanding the situation, the man can master it, perceive weak spots, detect ways of going around it, and devise ways of accomplishing his aims in spite of it. This will necessitate his modify his actions to some extent, but his purpose in doing so is not to coexist with the danger but to defeat it, and to prevent it from destroying his mission. The ways of doing this become immediately apparent once the danger is fully understood. Danger that is not simply adapted to can actually assist the man in his tasks, because it points out to him the precise things he needs to do and overcome in order to succeed. He does not inadvertently overlook something that could undermine his efforts. As a result, his work is of a higher quality than it would be if the danger did not exist. Establishing dangerous possibilities can also be used as a protective measure, to prevent ill-meaning persons from destroying a work in progress. Ignoring danger, or allowing it to bring one's activity to a halt, is always detrimental, but danger that is recognized and dealt with is just another necessary element in accomplishing something significant. The maxim "the superior man influences others through his consistency and persistence." He never lets up, he never relaxes his standards. When he comes upon a problem, he stays with it until there is no doubt that the problem has been overcome. The inferior teacher is not like that. When his student stumbles and needs intensive work, in order to overcome a particular area of misunderstanding or lack of skill, the inferior teacher simply moves on to something new without working with thoroughness in the problem area, and the student never acquires that solid foundation necessary in order to make real progress. Moving on gives the illusion of progress, but it is really a disservice to the student. Requiring the student to work through the difficult area, and repeat the material correctly until it is thoroughly embedded is the only way he can acquire expertise. 30. The clinging. The decision a sage who gives the light of understanding to other men must have within himself a self-renewing source of wisdom. This wisdom is not derived from the sage's own invention or creation, but from a harmonious relationship he has with the universe. He contemplates the life of man in the universe and the movement of fate acting through the power of truth and the right, and this gives him insight into the destinies of men. But these are not his own thoughts. At best, he is able to perceive the way, and to describe what he sees. Thus, by clinging to and being dependent on this relationship to the universe, he is able to spread the light of truth, and reveal the will of heaven to others. No man on this earth is totally free. Every man is subject to universal laws of rightness which, if he goes against them, will cause him to suffer the consequences dictated by other universal laws. real success, not mere transitory fame or monetary wealth, will come to the man when he recognizes his dependence upon these universal forces, and determines to act in accordance with them. It is through this sort of compliant dependence that he acquires a deep insight into his own life and the lives of other men, and thus is able to find a proper and rewarding place in the world, all of which is based on an attitude of submission to the powers that work in him and through him, and not on his own arrogant sense of power emanating from himself. He makes no claims for himself, and this gives him great power coupled with quiet confidence and tranquility. The maxim "a great man is a function of nature in the world." He acts not from personal force, but as a source of the universal forces acting through man. In this way, he is able to instruct and enlighten other men, and spread this brightness far and wide. But he does this as an instrument, not as provocateur in his own right. His greatness derives from the fact that he is able to respond to and express the power of universal truths, and that he is able to let these great powers work through him and shine through him. This enables him to affect other men deeply and profoundly. 31. Influence. The decision all success in human relationships depends upon the proper attraction between persons. The leader is attracted to his followers, and the followers are attracted to the leader. The strong are attracted to the weak, and the weak are attracted to the strong. The husband to the wife, and the wife to the husband. This mutual reliance causes them to come together, to work together, and to find success together. Their natures complement one another, and produce a combination that is mutually reinforcing and that supplies what the other lacks. This balancing of opposites can function within the same individual. An inner restraint coupled with an outward expression of joy produces an evenness of temperament that allows the individual to remain within the bounds of propriety. The influential relationship of the strong and the weak should not be taken as a predatory relationship, in which one person takes advantage of the other and uses his strength to exploit the weaker member. On the contrary, the strong takes the initiative and honors, respects, and protects the weak, shows deference to the weak, and thus enables the strong and the weak to join together in a mutually beneficial relationship. It is this beneficial attention to the weaker member that attracts that member and produces a cheerful, joyous response in the weaker one. It is the spiritual strength of the wise sage that attracts his followers to him, and that enables him to exert influence over them. And it is their need and receptivity that attracts him to them. By examining the affinity that beings have for one another, it is possible to understand the dynamics of every being and of every relationship in existence. The maxim when seeking advice, a man must remain open-minded and receptive. If a man asks advice only in the hope that he shall hear agreement with the course he has already chosen, he cuts himself off from a source of influence that could be very beneficial to his efforts. If he asks only as a matter of form, or because his superiors require that he seek a consensus, but then resents any suggestions for change that he receives, he will cut himself off from a valuable source of intelligence. If he arrogantly resents suggestions from colleagues or customers and considers any counsel as an invasion of his private business, he has isolated himself from the kind of feedback that his business needs to survive. The interplay of influence is the essence of community relations, and an individual cannot ignore this flow of influence and expect good fortune to come. 32. Duration. The decision a man endures, not by remaining static, but by encompassing movement and progressive activity. Because the universe itself is in a constant state of change, a man must also change just to keep up. Were he to attempt to endure by standing fast and unmovable, he would in fact fall behind as everything else moves beyond him. Therefore, he does not try to restrain himself to one particular position in order to endure. Instead, he adapts to the times, and remains in a state of constant but consistent renewal. Moreover, this renewal does not indicate change dictated by outer circumstances, but change that is directed from within in response to the outer circumstances. Change dictated by outer circumstances has no intelligence behind it. It can as easily lead to bad as to good results. But inner-directed change is fully aware of the necessity for change, and responds to a changing environment in the right way. Such change is also aware of the mission that the man is engaged upon, so that the aims and purposes, the meaning behind his efforts, endure even those circumstances, and the means to deal with those circumstances are in a constant state of change. It is important that the man not be guided by fixed ideas, but that he be flexible and open to new possibilities. This permits the meaning of his efforts to endure even in the process of adaptation, and it is through this kind of consistent endurance that we can understand the nature of all things that endure in time. The maxim man is surrounded by change, yet through it all he remains man. His nature endures steadily in the face of every kind of turmoil. This endurance rests upon a consistent but flexible way of dealing with the turmoil, and this in turn requires great sensitivity to the nature of the turmoil that engulfs him. It is not through isolation or adherence to some fixed ritual, but with eyes fully open to what is happening around him, that the man determines his responses, and thus enables his essence to endure. 33. Retreat. The decision. There is an ebb and flow in the affairs of men. At some times progressive forces are favored, but now the regressive forces are in ascendancy. In these times, it is useless for the superior man to waste his resources in a struggle with the regressive, inferior forces, therefore he withdraws from the conflict and awaits a more favorable time. In no way is this a cowardly retreat, he gives no quarter, he surrenders nothing. Rather, he consolidates his position in preparation for a more advantageous advance later on. By withdrawing, he removes himself from the possibility of attack at a time when he has little chance of accomplishing anything constructive. By withdrawing now, the superior man is able to complete the work needed for further advance. Until that work is complete, he is potentially vulnerable. Incomplete preparation means the entire endeavor may be dismissed or disregarded, and such an initial rejection may make it difficult to be given a fair consideration later on. Let the inferior forces have their day, they cannot progress very far. In fact, their apparent advance only allows them to overextend themselves, and to reveal how truly inadequate they are. Once their inadequacy becomes obvious, it will be that much easier to combat them successfully. When he withdraws, the superior man does not give any acknowledgement of success by the inferior, he just removes himself from the fray. Therefore it is important that his withdrawal be his own intentional act, while still in command of himself, and not a response to action from the opposing forces. He does not, in other words, withdraw because of being beaten back. This decision is a result of a careful assessment of the situation and of his own resources. The opposition, as a result, will hardly notice. Even in withdrawal, he gives resistance to random encounters from the opposition, but he does not aggressively seek those encounters. Not until preparation is complete does he launch a genuine assault. Till then, he remains quietly out of the range of fire. In this way, the inferior forces cannot use a conflict to deflect the scrutiny of themselves and their own inadequacies. The maxim when he withdraws, the superior man does not acknowledge success by the inferior man, he just removes himself from the fray and places himself out of reach by the inferior forces. He does not actively combat the inferior forces, he just frustrates them, and allows them to stew in their own juices, and he does this simply by not allowing himself to become involved. 34. Great power. The decision a man finds himself in a position to exercise great power. He has the ability to lead, and to wield his influence over others. The power of great men derives from their personal strength and their ability to take action. The danger in such power, however, is that a man may rely entirely upon his strength and his ability to take the initiative, and forget to temper his actions with a sense of what is right and an estimate of whether his timing is correct. Just because a man is capable, just because something is possible, does not make it a right thing to do, and does not mean that now is the right time to do it. The exercise of power can only be justified when it is used correctly and justly. Evil arises when great power functions apart from justice, and a man can easily do something, what is wrong just because the door seems to be open to do it and a forceful effort seems all that is needed. Every act of oppression, every violation of human rights, occurs when men possess power and are capable of taking charge, but care not at all whether what they do is just and considerate of the rights of others. Therefore, a man should look not only at his abilities, but he should carefully consider whether what he intends to do is right, and whether it may be too early to act. When his abilities are combined with justice and a well-timed effort, truly great things may be accomplished. The maxim: the superior man may have the power to do anything he wishes, but he does not exercise that power in ways that might violate the norms of the community in which he lives. He voluntarily and deliberately limits his own actions to those that are in harmony with the established way of doing things, because his greatness and his influence arise not just from his own inner capabilities, but from the relationship he maintains with the rest of the community in which he lives. Were he to violate the established norms of that community, those actions would tend to diminish the respect that he receives and would cause those who have confidence in him to wonder if perhaps their confidence is misplaced. Violations of community norms are generally trivial things, and not worth jeopardizing one's standing amongst his fellow men. Therefore, the superior man makes this small sacrifice in order to maintain the position of honor that has been afforded him. 35. Progress. The decision: it is a time of expansion, of ever-widening influence. Persons in powerful positions look to those who can influence others and can muster their loyalty. Such a man acts as an intermediary, connecting the powerful to the masses, and the masses to their rightful leaders. He is honored and well rewarded for this invaluable service. He is able to influence the masses, because he is a man of the people, and their most fundamental interests are his interests. He is well received by the powerful because he is a modest man, and does not seek power for himself, or to promote his own private interests. He is able to be such a trusted intermediary, because he has wisdom and insight. All of these factors work together to produce unhindered, significant progress. A man of influence in a time of progress must be a man of clarity and insight. The more he purifies himself, the greater is his influence. Man's nature is naturally pure and uncontaminated, but it becomes obscured by a pursuit of power over people and a lust for material things. A superior man is not consumed by such desires, and is able to act with disinterest. Those with whom he comes in contact realize instinctively that he can be trusted. 36. Diminished influence. The decision a man of inferior nature gains a position of authority, and is able to do injury to the superior man. But this does not mean that the superior man should relinquish his principles, and give in to this adverse situation. If his ability to act is curtailed and his influence has no effect, he nevertheless remains inwardly firm. He does not allow his basic principles to be altered by adverse external circumstances. If he finds it necessary to work with others, he does so, although he does not share their convictions. Outwardly, he does not make trouble, because there is no chance that he might be successful. He avoids contention and does not threaten the opposition. It is not within his power to effectively oppose the inferior man, so he does not mount a resistance in an effort to overthrow him, and does not even actively oppose him. But he does not lend his weight in support of the inferior man's principles, while he keeps his opposition hidden. He remains steady by refraining from actively giving his support to the inferior man. Since the superior man is not in a position to impose his will upon the conduct of affairs, he remains steadfast but quiet, keeping his aims and purposes within and patiently waiting for the times to change and for his influence to be effective once again. Those who hold to the same principles as the superior man will naturally gravitate towards him without his having to make a display of his non-support or actively seeking to convince them. All should understand, however, that these circumstances indicate the time is not ripe to take affirmative steps. The maxim in times that are not favorable to the progress of superior men, those men withdraw and do not try to force their views on those around them. They realize that to do so would only intensify the opposition and make the situation more difficult. They remain apart from the opposing forces, but they do not openly castigate them, or try to arouse additional opposition against them. They realize that this is not a time to correct the behavior of others, and generally try to keep relationships smooth and free from contention. But at the same time, they keep themselves from being infected by the unfavorable times. 37. The family. The decision. The proper relationships within a family are examples of the kind of order that should exist in the community, the state, and society as a whole. The family is the basic organizational unit that combines to form other social organizations, and when the family functions properly, the other social units shall function properly also. Each family exists as a unit, and the members of the family relate to one another in a manner that promotes their mutual stability and endurance. The well-being of the entire family is a matter of concern to each member, and the pursuits of each member are a concern of the whole family. The role of each member is based on affection, yet this affection manifests itself in different ways depending upon the given role. The family is organized around the authority of the parents, of which the father, as head of the family, provides strong leadership and moral correctness, and the mother as devoted and loyal subordinate holds the family together while ministering to their collective and individual needs. Without the strong moral leadership of the father, the different roles of the members are not sharply drawn and their duties to one another are not made clear. Without the mother nurturing to the needs of each member, each one would drift apart and develop independently. Thus, the relationship between the husband and the wife is the central organizational principle of the entire family. The son as junior member relates to the father with love and respect. The younger and the older brothers relate to one another with affectionate concern and loyalty. These relationships have their counterpart in larger social units, with the principle of strong leadership at the head, devoted subordinates as ministers, and members who give respect and deference to those of superior rank in the community, and who give support to one another with affection and loyalty. It is through these inner relationships that the moral duties that human beings owe one another are facilitated and order is maintained. The relationships of the family, therefore, are the fundamental relationships of all mankind, and are necessary to keep the world in order. The maxim "a man's words have influence on others" when they proceed directly from his inner being. Words gain their power from their relationship to what is specific and real. Generalities and theories have little influence, because they lack the means to apply the pronouncements to real-life situations. A man's words must be reinforced by his actions, otherwise they can only be seen as experimental thoughts that may or may not be valid. Pronouncements require the force of the speaker's action in order to make a real impression on others. Only when a listener is fully aware of the correspondence between a man's words and his deeds will his words have real meaning to him. 38. Opposition. The decision the active forces are in direct opposition to one another. All opposites have a common relationship, otherwise they would be merely disparate, but not opposite. Opposition implies contrasting views of the same thing. Because of this opposition of viewpoints, it is not possible to pursue activities that require cooperation and coordination. Different viewpoints mean people are not able to work together, hence difficult and complex projects may not be undertaken. Nevertheless, the very fact that commonality does exist means that some minor understandings can be reached, and some small improvements may be made. But if one attempts to forge ahead with the accomplishment of something big, it will surely end in failure. In some situations, opposition is a necessary part of the endeavor. As often happens, opposing forces can result in the creation of something new that results from their combination. Thus, management and labor produce manufactured goods. Opposing political forces produce compromises under which huge numbers of people can live. Criticism and debate often produce a better understanding of truth. Not all opposition represents unproductive conflict. Differences that represent opposition provide a basis for understanding the internal organization of complex phenomena. Thus, the effects of light and dark help in understanding plant growth. Upholding differences is important if the integrity of distinct phenomena is to be maintained. In this way, a superior man may associate with inferior men, if he retains his own character, and does not adopt their inferior ways. 39. Obstruction. The decision at a time when a man is surrounded by insurmountable obstacles, the only proper course is to retreat. Retreat is a strategic move, however, and does not mean that the man gives up or abandons his goals. Quite the contrary, he merely makes a rational judgment about his chances for moving ahead which are not good, and then backs off long enough to reassess the situation, acquire additional forces, and formulate a new plan for overcoming the obstacles. He finds people of like mind who can aid him in his quest, and he solicits the help of someone who is capable of mastering the situation and solving the problems he faces. With this combined strength and expert guidance, he will be able to clear the path and move forward with little difficulty. It would be a foolish move, however, if he were to try to advance in spite of the obstacles and without additional help. Developing a new plan is the only sensible move to make. Inferior men dislike the thought of retreat or the idea of seeking help, because they think it makes them look weak. Such men feel compelled always to present an image of strength and unconquerability in the face of any amount of difficulty. But such hubris easily leads to disaster. It shows that the man's emotions, not his intelligence, is directing his actions. An intelligent man looks upon a difficult situation with a strictly rational eye. His purpose is to accomplish the goals he has set for himself, not to project some glorious self-image, and his focus on moving ahead with the best chances of success means that he will be more likely to achieve good fortune than the inferior man filled with bravado. Obstructions that force a person to make intelligent decisions develop a man's character. They force him to swallow his pride, hold his emotions in check, and let his rational mind direct his activities. The maxim problems that arise in the course of living are always occasions for developing character. In one way or another, they force a person to find mature, healthy, and correct ways of dealing with the situation. An inferior man angrily curses his bad luck or the evil intentions of others, and seizes upon any evil means for getting even. The superior man, on the other hand, looks within himself for the proper way to deal with the situation. He faces problems squarely and unemotionally, while the inferior man lashes out at any and all that he thinks may be responsible for his difficulties, and often tries to punish someone else for his inability to find a proper solution. For the superior man, however, adversity is a crucible, in which he learns about life and how to develop his character. 40. Deliverance. The decision after passing through a time of great difficulties and obstructions, the situation begins to change and the tense relationships that had previously prevailed begin to disappear. The man is no longer faced with great dangers. The struggle is over, and deliverance is at hand. At such a time, it is important that all operations, previously geared up for defensive actions, immediately be returned to normal. Reverting to ordinary conditions brings good fortune, because freedom from the pressures of obstructions and opposition has a liberating effect, and this acts as a stimulus to all. Everyone feels the removal of the stress, and all feel invigorated with a desire to put the difficult past behind them and begin again with their normal lives. That is why it is so important to cut back the measures that had been taken to meet the stressful situation, and allow ordinary life to resume. If that is done, all this invigorating energy created by the deliverance can immediately be applied to everyday affairs, and good and needed things can be accomplished. There are some things to be kept in mind, however. If there are any final details connected with the previous difficult situation that need to be taken care of, those should be completed as soon as possible so that everyone begins with a clean slate. Then, the regular order of things can be commenced without any distracting issues. It is also important that the victory over the opposing forces not be overplayed. That in itself would create additional difficulties, because it is just another form of continuing the previous conflict. Trying to capitalize on a victory incites bitterness and resentment in the defeated, whereas if ordinary conditions are resumed as soon as possible, those who suffered defeat are much more accepting of their fate, and are happy to join in the effort to get things back to normal. The maxim "the superior man stands ready to forgive the misdeeds and overlook the errors of the past." If mistakes were made, but have since been recognized and overcome, he gladly puts them behind him. To dwell on them only irritates and produces no beneficial effect. Indeed, harping on things that everyone has already recognized as errors could only stir up resentment and keep past difficulties alive. Inferior men do that because they get satisfaction from making others uncomfortable and from making them look bad. If malicious things were done in the past, the superior man forgives the offender and stands ready to move ahead. Inferior men cling to the offenses of the past, forever demanding satisfaction, and thus allow past transgressions to obstruct a forward movement. Overlooking errors and forgiving past offenses is a part of putting past difficulties behind and moving ahead into a brighter, more positive future. 41. Decrease. The decision a time of diminished resources is not favorable for advancing, therefore a man should hold back. Nature itself has an ebb and flow in its supportive forces, and a man should recognize these movements, and not try to go beyond the bounds of what is possible at any given time. To push ahead when resources are not sufficient only exhausts the small reserves of energy that now exist and creates instability and indirection. This leads to a lack of accomplishment. Such a time as this calls for economy and simplicity, both of which establish a base from which solid advancement may occur later on. It would be a mistake, however, to try to pretend that resources are not diminished, and to put on an outward show, as though nothing has changed. That would introduce an element of falseness and deception, that would undermine the meaning of everything a man attempts to do. Holding back may be viewed as an embarrassing lack of courage, but to think so would be a mistake. Instead, pretending there is no reason for holding back indicates a shameful lack of integrity. A man should turn his attention to the development of inner substance, not to flashy exhibition, and holding back gives him enough pause to concentrate on the development of that substance and enough strength to attend to present necessities. Simplicity accompanied by substance is of much greater value than false appearances and a lack of sincerity. Especially in religious exercises, a man should remember that the Creator looks upon the man's heart, not upon elaborate ceremonies. Simplicity is of far greater importance than elaborate showiness. The maxim a man is often led by strong emotional feelings, whether of anger or indignation, or by frivolous passions, that divert the man's energies. Following such inclinations produces no positive gains. Instead, it results in a wasting of effort and resources, and a deviation from a serious attitude that might produce more positive results. Therefore, the superior man holds back his emotions, and this allows him to curb his baser instincts, and give emphasis to the higher aspirations of his inner man. 42. Increase. The decision those above make sacrifices for the benefit of those below, and this fills all the people with an enormous sense of appreciation. The greatest, most effective ruler is he who would be willing to sacrifice himself and his own interests in favor of those he rules. It often happens that inferior men, who gain high positions, sacrifice the needs and interests of those below for their own enrichment, and that of their friends. When the opposite happens, the people recognize this, are filled with gratitude, and this contributes enormously towards the progress and good fortune of the entire community. It is this spirit of self-sacrifice instead of exploitation that enables those above to do great things for mankind, because they win over the hearts of those below and arouse their loyalty and dedication. If the leaders make great sacrifices, the people feel compelled to do as much or more. This, in turn, engenders a spirit of enthusiasm and devotion towards the community that enables them to complete great and even dangerous enterprises. It is necessary, however, that the momentum provided by this time of increased dedication to the community be carried through in a timely fashion, and that whatever work there is that needs to be undertaken be begun immediately. Such sentiments tend to dissipate, if they do not in due course bear fruit. Therefore the energy that has been aroused should be expended immediately, on whatever needs to be done. The maxim a man develops his character, by observing the acts of others and of himself. If he sees something superior in another man's character, he adopts it for his own. If he sees something inferior in his own character, he eradicates it, and if he sees something undesirable in the character of another, he makes sure he does not imitate it. Through this constant process of imitating what is good and eliminating what is bad, a man refines his character over time, and thus increases his influence and his standing before men. 43. Breakthrough. The decision after a long period of difficulty and opposition, tensions finally begin to ease. The influence of inferior people is lessening, and the stage is set for the superior man to take vigorous action, to move ahead and finally get something done. An inferior man in a position of authority has the power to prevent superior men from furthering their goals, just as the mind, when focused on a negative thought, can prevent a man from acting reasonably. It is necessary, therefore, for the superior elements to assert themselves, and to become the dominating factor, whether in one's own mind or in one's community. In the struggle of right against wrong, however, what is right must conduct itself in right ways, if it is to be successful. Wrong means cannot be used to promote what is right, because wrong means corrupt everything they touch, and turn their object into an offense. The struggle for what is right, therefore, always requires the exertion of strength, but it requires that it be exerted with kindness and goodwill. An inconsiderate use of force produces oppression. Moreover, the pursuit of what is good cannot be compromised with what is evil, for if it is, it weakens and dilutes the good, and introduces elements that will over time eat away from within at the integrity of the good. Therefore it is important that a clear distinction be made between good and evil, and that any vestiges of evil lurking in the background not be overlooked and allowed to confuse the superior man's perspective. At the same time, it is important that that which is evil should be replaced with the good without battling it point for point. To enter into contention with evil only incites it to rise to its defense, and drags the superior man down into an exchange of animosities. Evil can be eliminated simply by replacing it with good so that it is almost insensible that it is being replaced. Contending with evil, whether within ourselves or in others, only reinforces its existence, whereas replacing evil with good allows the evil to fall into disuse and fade away. The maxim the superior man does not focus on accumulating things and making himself full, but rather on a beneficial distribution of whatever he acquires: wealth, knowledge, wisdom, for the benefit of others. The real purpose of accumulation of things is their use, and that which is accumulated solely for its own sake has a tendency to be distributed, or lost in one way or another. Accumulating excessive wealth just for oneself invites mismanagement, embezzlement, thieves, and all kinds of unhappy consequences. Accumulating knowledge without sharing it serves no purpose for mankind, and leads to inactivity and loss. Accumulating excessive material goods invites their spoilage and deterioration. The superior man lives with a constant flow of things coming in and going out. His character develops, not by focusing on his fullness, what he is, and what he has, but by opening himself to new ideas, examining himself to eliminate what is undesirable, and adding to his character what is good. 44. Return of dark force. The decision after inferior elements have been successfully eliminated, they surreptitiously make a surprising reappearance from within. This is especially dangerous, because it has the beguiling appearance of innocence, and it comes forward seductively on its own. This has all the marks of a trap, and it is important that the man take firm steps as soon as possible to put a stop to it and eliminate the danger. This inferior element has the appearance of weakness and harmlessness, and the man is easily deceived into thinking that nothing ill will come of a casual association with it. This causes him to be accepting of the initial advances, and to extend his own hand towards it to embrace it. Thus, by increments, the inferior element works its way into the man's confidence and into a position of power, where it will certainly do nothing but harm. This could not happen if the superior man recognized the inferior element as dangerous at the very first advances. What entraps the man is the fact that weak elements are always coming to him for assistance and guidance, otherwise they remain completely in the background, and have no concerns to bring before him. Thus, his natural sense of generosity tends to permit him to reach out to the weaker elements that do approach him. This is the way strong persons help those who are having difficulties or need guidance, and a man of generous temperament naturally meets them halfway, so that they will not feel like intruders. If the intentions of the weak, inferior element approaching the strong are honest, this ordinarily creates no problem. But if instead, the inferior element uses the occasion as a pretense, and only appears to need help, in order to insinuate itself into the man's confidence, then there is the possibility of a dangerous situation developing. The maxim: a man in a leadership position is always in a sense separated from his people. They are all concerned with the everyday matters of their own lives, and of those who are close to them, whereas the leader must have a broader vision. He is concerned with the lives of all his people, and the guidance that he gives to them. His decrees and judgments that affect them individually are formulated to promote the progress and development of the entire community. He takes into consideration not only today's problems and needs, but the needs of future generations as far as the mind can see. His influence extends even beyond those living today. It is from such a perspective that he develops policies and issues decrees that individuals may fail to understand, and they may question his wisdom. Nevertheless, he must obey the dictates of his broader vision and act in accordance with that view, not necessarily in accordance with what his people, who do not see what he sees, might wish. 45. Coming together. The decision people come together to form a family or a community, and they unite behind a leader. Such an assemblage is sustained by ceremonies that unite all members to one another, to those who went before them, and to the community as a whole. By remembering and honoring those present as well as those past, people acquire a spiritual affinity for one another, for their family, and for their community, that produces a lifelong, deeply felt allegiance in each individual member. To be effective, these observances must be conducted by a leader of the family or community, who is well founded in the traditions of the past, and who can instill in others an appreciation of the fullness of life that their predecessors have made possible for those living in the present. It is only through a recognition of this kind of unifying spiritual force that a whole people can be brought together to produce a great civilization and to make great contributions towards the advancement of mankind. The maxim: whenever people or possessions are gathered together, problems can arise. People may tend to fall into disagreements when they gather together, possessions may be lost, or pilfered when they are collected together, and any other kinds of collisions of interests may occur due to the close quartering. It is essential, therefore, that individuals be prepared for all possibilities, and that they take steps to guard against those disasters that are likely to occur. While hoping that everything goes smoothly, it is always a good idea to be prepared in case they don't. 46. Pushing upward. The decision and upward movement from humble and obscure beginnings to a position of power and influence is possible, but it requires hard work if success is to be obtained. Even if there is nothing blocking the man's path, he must nevertheless expend a great amount of energy, and he must do it in the right way, if he is to find the good fortune that is possible. When nothing is blocking the way, harsh, overly aggressive measures are not necessary, and their use could be counterproductive. When everything is favorable, it behooves the man to act modestly, to be friendly, and to adapt himself to the times. The absence of obstructions means he has clear sailing, and he can expect that whatever energy he expends will not be wasted on ancillary problems, but will be rewarded with great success. He should exploit every possible advantage available to him, such as talking to influential people, who can help him as he moves ahead. He should get to know people in authoritative positions, and do what he can to win their support. Since he is not up against any kind of obstacles or opposition, he can forge ahead without having to overcome competitors or enemies. The only care he needs to take is that he not undermine his own purposes by being brash, boastful, or pushy, and that he not fail to take advantage of the favorable situation out of carelessness or laziness. Being active and assertive without being arrogant or obnoxious will open all doors. The maxim: the superior man sets goals, and adheres to them assiduously. He attends to details in order to accomplish great works, and does not neglect anything that is part of his scheme. He formulates plans and devises strategies, and he always knows what he is about. If one plan is found to be unproductive, he has 2 or 3 other possibilities that he can try. He remains steady in pursuit of his goals, and never ignores things that need to be done. He is not anxious about his work, but he does love it, and his mind remains open night and day to the infusion of better ways of getting things done. 47. Oppression. The decision a time of adversity means that a man is being held back by inferior men and circumstances and prevented from achieving his goals. Ordinarily, this means failure and misfortune for a man. Nevertheless, a superior man can cause such an occasion to have a successful outcome, if he responds to the oppression in the right way. When reversals and oppression come to a man of character, he does not lose hope. He keeps a positive attitude, and this is the source of his later success. Such an attitude enables him to align himself with any movement that comes his way that might be advantageous. If his attitude is one of doom and gloom, positive opportunities are almost certainly ignored. Everything appears to such a man as just another door to disaster. But if, in spite of the adverse circumstances, a man remains alert to the slightest glimmer of something constructive, any little thing that might enable him to advance his goals, then he is able to discriminate between the little diamonds of hope and a dunghill of negativity and opposition. In this way, a positive mental attitude will become stronger than any circumstances he may be mired in. Change is the essence of existence, and a positive attitude will enable him to hitch his wagon to those beneficial elements that will help pull him out of the slough of despond. Of course, there is little to help the man who allows adverse circumstances to rob him of the vision that he seeks to achieve. But if reversals only cause a man to be put to a test, they actually strengthen him, sharpen his reflexes, and intensify his determination to achieve his goals. If anything, this causes him to work harder, to focus his attention, and to sharpen his skills. All of this, as a consequence, turns him into a formidable player. Unfortunately, not every man has this strength of character. Times of adversity separate the great men from the inferior ones. The great men go on to prevail, to achieve success and good fortune, and they do this through honorable and honest means. The inferior man is not equal to the task, he accepts his failure, withdraws, and seeks a path that is less demanding. During the time of adversity, there is little to differentiate the great man and the inferior man. Both seem to be getting nowhere, both have little or no influence on those about them, and neither are able to make much of an impression. Therefore it behooves both to keep quiet. But the great man has within him the inner determination and the hope that will enable him to overcome this difficult time. He will see it through, and he will rise above it. The maxim in a time of adversity: the superior man accepts the adverse time for what it is, but remains true to himself and inwardly not discouraged by it. He knows what he wants to achieve. He has a purpose, even though his intentions are denied him temporarily. This is the run of fate. But this is also an external thing, and he does not allow it to affect his inner man. What he is not determined by external circumstances, and what he is remains unmoved by the vicissitudes of fate. 48. The wellspring. The decision. The wellspring of man's life never changes. It is the same now, as it has been for thousands of years. When a man is in touch with his true nature, he can draw wisdom from that wellspring, to guide him in all the decisions he must make. The conditions of life changes. Political and social organizations change, but the essentials of life remain the same. Governments come and go, but the ordinary life of the people and their need to work together for their mutual benefit never change. Generations pass away, and new ones are born to take their places, but the rich variety of life built on this unchanging foundation remains ever before every man. But in order to fulfill these human needs, individuals and the socio-political organizations of man must endeavor to comprehend the depths of these unchanging foundations of life. A careless or casual approach is of no use and is more likely to mislead. If a man fails to penetrate to the deepest understanding of his place in the universe, if he attaches himself to conventional ideas and ways, his development as a person will suffer. The maxim: the superior man in his role as a leader gathers men together, organizes their tasks and coordinates their functions so that everyone works together in pursuit of the goals of the whole organization. He makes sure that the various divisions work together with one another, and not think solely about the portion of the work assigned to their own. 49. Revolution. The decision. A time of revolutionary change finds opposing forces in conflict with one another, and with each trying to replace the other. This represents a very determined opposition, because one of the forces is going out of existence, while the other is coming in, and there is no possibility of their coexistence. In order to bring about this shift, the man who adopts revolutionary change as his mission should be certain of three things. 1. that he has the support of the majority of people who will be affected by the change. 2. That this is a necessary change, and there is no other way of resolving the existing difficulties. And 3. That the time is right for the change to occur. It never happens that all the people affected will support change, and revolutionary change should never be undertaken for light and transient causes. Even under the worst of conditions, there will be some who believe that allegiance should predominate over every other sentiment. The best time for undertaking revolutionary change is after a long train of abuses have demonstrated that only a drastic change will answer the present need. It is inevitable that such drastic transformations will be called for from time to time, as people and nations go through the cycles of their existence. Nevertheless, when revolutionary change is decided upon, it is essential that it be conducted in the right way, that is, that everything be done in a way that the people affected by the change can support with their whole heart, and that the people be kept informed of the intentions and the goals of the revolutionary change as well as the progress that is being made. In this way, revolutionary change does not become a cloak for nefarious schemes that go on out of the people's view. This also means that the leaders for revolutionary change have no ideas about personal gain, but pursue change for the benefit of all the people affected. When the principal leader can carry out the revolutionary change with that degree of disinterestedness, he will be revered and honored as a benefactor of his people. The maxim: by carefully observing the cycles that nature goes through, and by noting the same kinds of cycles in the lives of men, a man can discern a certain orderliness that arises in what at first appears to be chaos and a lack of direction. Change is the essence of the universe, and the forces compelling change build up until a revolution comes about as a necessary consequence. Thus, in the life of mankind, the conditions of social life go through a stage of development until the time is right for a new mode of living, a new lifestyle. The wise man sees this and accepts it. He adapts to it and embraces change as a necessary element of life itself. And when changes finally do occur, he is not upset nor destroyed by it, but sees it as the natural unfolding of existence. Like the beast in the forest, he sees the signs of a new season developing, and he makes preparations to receive it. 50. The cauldron. The decision: all things in the physical world find their true meaning and proper relationships in the spiritual world. It is by understanding this connection that a man is able to understand his place in the universe, and envision the path he should take, so that his life will be in harmony with the universal forces. When a man is able to establish in his own life the harmony between heaven and earth, he can understand the way the power of heaven works through his life on this earth in determining his fate. And when he understands that, he will know how to act to bring himself into that harmonious relationship. Doing this enhances his potential, and brings him genuine success and exceptional good fortune. Thus, the highest, the deepest, and the truest human values are not derived from the calculated judgments of man, but from the understanding of man vis nature, that is, the life of man in relation to the natural order of things. In this way, the highest values and the comprehension of universal forces are manifested in man's life not independently of man, but through the agency of man himself. The superior man, the great man, the sage, are all designations for the men on this earth, who have identified themselves with the powers of the universe, and who serve as sources for understanding these powers. It therefore behooves every man to honor and respect these men, and to learn from them the true meaning of universal things. The maxim: by seeking to understand his life in relation to the powers of the universe, a man is able to draw the benefits of these powers into his own life, and discover the fate that these powers produce. He does this by acting in accordance with the universal powers, which puts him in harmony with those powers, and fills his life with the beneficial results that accompany those powers. 51. Arousing. The decision. The shock of sudden change is terrifying, and easily disturbs the fearful and those entrenched in complacency. Many of life's changes are gradual, but others come upon us suddenly and unpredictably turn our world upside down. But the man, who is familiar with the nature of change in the universe, takes it all in his stride. He gladly embraces the change, and does not allow it to disturb him in the least. He sees in change the manifestation of natural forces. He knows what must be done, and proceeds to do it with confidence and a steady hand in the face of disturbance all about him. A leader of men establishes a steady course. He is not deterred by the fear of sudden change. He knows that his measures will often make drastic changes in traditional or customary procedures, and he proceeds cautiously, but without the slightest element of fear. The superior man, when faced with sudden change, remains steady in his sense of the divine presence in this world. He seeks always to place himself in accord with the will of heaven and makes that his lodestar. With a clear vision of what he is about, he does not allow his reaction to sudden change to sway him from a steady course. This overreaching vision guides him as he examines himself, and as he faces the sudden ups and downs in his own life. The maxim. The superior man, when faced with sudden change, remains steady in his observation of the divine presence in this world. He examines himself, in order to place himself in harmony with the will of heaven, and he makes that will his lodestar. With a clear vision of what he is about, he does not allow reactions to sudden change to sway him from a steady course of action. Thus he discovers that reverence for the divine will is the fundamental guiding principle in the formation of human society. 52. Keeping still. The decision. There is a time to move forward and a time to keep still, but a man relates to both most properly from a condition of stillness. It is from a state of quiet stillness that a man gains a proper perspective on his life in relationship to the world about him. He is able to see both activity and rest as parts of the continuum of life, which alternates from one to the other, as required by the circumstances in which he is involved at any given moment. But it is in stillness that he is able to reflect on his life, and judge the propriety of movement, and this stillness, together with quiet contemplation, is the proper state of mind from which to begin movement, and the proper state to return to after movement. When mind and body are still, both are in a receptive state that makes them ready to respond to whatever the outside world presents them. With a quiet mind, the focus of the man is not on his inner self, but on the exterior world that is happening around him at that very instant. When he has that kind of mental focus, his mind is pure, and he is ready to deal with the outer world in all its complexity. He no longer sees the world as a competitive struggle, as a clash of his values with the values of others, but as simple events. This provides him with a genuine peace of mind, and allows him to deal with the outer world, not from a perspective of man against man struggle, but as events that occur in accordance with the natural laws of the universe. When he can do that, he can then act in such a way as will be in harmony with those laws, and he will be able to relate to all persons as is proper. When his actions are in harmony with the will of heaven as expressed in these natural laws, his deeds will be correct, and his actions will be the most beneficial possible with respect to the existing conditions. The maxim: the mind of man has a tendency to ruminate over the whole field of his existence. His mind jumps from thoughts of past injuries to present fears or concerns, from recent events to future possibilities, from today's needs to tomorrow's hopes. With this incessant rambling, a man keeps his spirits in turmoil and his sensibilities agitated. But in a time of quiet, which can nourish his spirit, he allows all these ruminating thoughts to evaporate, and focuses his mind on the present place and the present moment. In that state of amazing stillness, when everything he sees moves gently, and everything he hears enters and leaves his consciousness without sticking, he realizes that, by far, the anxieties of man are all the creation of his own mind, and the calmness of this moment is able to bring peace to his spirit. 53. Development. The decision: a man's character develops gradually by taking deliberate action, starting from a position of quiet tranquility. An inner calmness enables him to contemplate a situation carefully and thoroughly, to plan exactly what is the correct path to take, and then to act purposely and deliberately, avoiding any thoughtless blunders. A man of character does not rely on his automatic reflexes, but contemplates his moves and then acts with great determination. Thus, developing character is not a matter of training one's automatic or natural responses, but of learning how to deliberate wisely and to proceed with perseverance. Such carefulness necessarily takes time, and the man of character does not rush into situations and relationships until he feels confident that he has taken all the necessary steps that will make him fully aware of what he is getting into, and that he has resolved in his inner self exactly what he should do. If it is his intent to influence others, he recognizes that a proper approach is one that respects the correct way of deciding by others, and does not try to get the other person to act on impulse. Rather, he takes a more gradual approach that allows the other to consider quietly and to act decisively. Those who coerce or trick others into making a sudden decision may obtain what they seek, but their victim will have regrets, and will seldom stand by the decision they were pushed into making so hastily. Those who would develop their own character cannot expect to do so by suddenly embracing some new idea, but through careful contemplation and deliberate action. Because all these forms of development proceed gradually, perseverance is a major element, since any long-term course of remedial action is in danger of being abandoned, if the man does not pursue it faithfully and diligently. The maxim: a superior man has influence upon everyone around him. His character places him above the multitude, and all look up to him. This influence does not come into being all of a sudden, however. The character of the superior man is the result of a long development, and his influence upon people is also the result of a long development. Nothing worthwhile concerning character or influence develops overnight. Anything of this nature that occurs suddenly never has a long-lasting effect. Indeed, the sudden appearance of someone attempting to influence other people is usually the mark of a charlatan. A man's character takes a long time to develop, and is the result of many experiences with a variety of tests and trials, through which the man learns to deal with difficult situations, and to do it with thought and persistence. Then, after his development is obvious to all, he wins the respect of all. His wise and good counsel is sought, and he exercises a strong influence on everyone who knows him. Such a man is not influential just because he thinks he has the right set of theories and beliefs, but because of the kind of character he has and the kind of man he is. 54. The marrying maiden. the decision a person enters into a subordinate relationship with a headman in a community that includes other subordinates, who are all more powerful than the newcomer. The power relationships have been long established, and the newcomer, though favored by the headman, is viewed as one who might disrupt the community's organization and possibly replace others, which would not at all be to their liking. It is a very delicate relationship, in which any forward or aggressive moves made by the new person will be viewed with suspicion and anger. This person, therefore, must behave with the utmost reserve in order to prevent more powerful subordinates from turning into vicious enemies. If this person were to try to push himself forward into a more commanding position, there would be an uproar and the others would be incensed. It is essential, therefore, that the new person try to establish friendly relationships with each one of the other subordinates who have, in fact, a higher status than does the new person. This is a very difficult situation, because each one of these other subordinates could make life impossible for the newcomer. The possibility that a misunderstanding may arise exists in every relationship where people are closely associated. Once people become involved with one another, all the odd idiosyncrasies of each one's personality comes to the fore, and has the potential to become a source of disagreement, dislike, or any other kind of emotional clash. This is human nature, and this is the kind of interpersonal conflict that is almost inevitable, if one is not careful. It is necessary, therefore, that a person closely involved in relationships with others keep in mind the reason why the community exists. By remaining focused on the purpose of the group and concentrated on topics and problems that relate to that purpose, it is possible to avoid personal issues that have nothing to do with the group's purpose. In this way, a man can steer clear of the pitfalls that lie in wait when groups of people are associated together in close quarters. 55. Abundance. The decision the man takes action in accordance with clear insight and understanding, and he is thus able to lead others to the very peak of greatness. But since change is the nature of the universe, the wise man realizes that this pinnacle of success, once attained, can only be enjoyed briefly and cannot last forever. Achieving the height of success means, inevitably, that decline of one sort or another must eventually follow, just as the sun at its zenith must then begin to move towards its setting. But the superior man is not discouraged by this realization. He knows that it is futile to try to remain always at a peak. He is grateful to have known true abundance, and rejoices in the present moment of success. Even though he must later descend from the pinnacle of success, his achievement will not vanish. Only a man who pursues what is great can know this level of success, and only a man who can put aside concerns about decline can successfully lead others at a time of great abundance. Therefore, in his leadership of others, he speaks only of the joy that all should have over the greatness they have achieved, and forbears any mention of the inevitable descent from the heights. Understanding and action are the traits necessary for achieving the pinnacle of success. Although the man's ventures may decline from this pinnacle, by maintaining those traits that got him thus far, the decline will not mean a complete reversal. The maxim clarity of vision permits a man to issue valid directives, force of action enables him to carry them through to a successful conclusion. Thus the superior man must retain active control over the enterprise for which he is responsible. He carefully looks into all matters that affect the enterprise, and oversees the administration to be sure that decisions are carried out thoroughly and precisely. 56. The wanderer. The decision: a man who travels to another location needs to exercise extreme care. As a stranger, he will have few friends and acquaintances, and it behooves him to maintain his best behavior, in order to stay out of trouble and avoid difficulties. A person who is traveling about does not have a circle of friends and established contacts, upon whom he can depend if problems arise. Therefore it makes sense for him to avoid risky situations. In dealing with people he meets along the way, he should be agreeable and compliant. They are in familiar territory and he is not, so they can help him, if he wins their approval and needs help. If he comes into conflict with them, they have many more resources to turn to than he, therefore he should avoid conflict if at all possible. If he conducts himself very carefully, and is not pretentious in his contacts with strangers, he will get along well, because most people will try to help a pleasant stranger. It is extremely important that a man avoid any kinds of illegal acts while traveling. Difficulties with the law are much more complicated, and can be much more difficult, if a person is not a native of the area. Such persons can easily be put in jail, when a native of the place would receive only a stern dressing down. The traveler, therefore, should endeavor to associate only with highly reputable people and only go to reputable business establishments. If he is careful and circumspect, he will be left to go his way freely, and he will accomplish all that he expects to do. The maxim: if a man runs into legal problems, he should try to settle them as quickly as possible. Nothing is gained but ill will, if a person tries to use the threat of legal action, in order to force concessions from other people. In a legal disagreement, both sides feel they are correct, and each sees coercion from the other side, as evidence of malice and evil intent. A man who is upright, and who has right on his side has not need to threaten another. Persons of good will settle their differences as quickly as possible. 57. The general. The decision: a great man of clear judgment and penetrating wisdom influences his associates. He uncovers hidden motives and exposes dark intrigues. He accomplishes this, not by single acts of surprising revelation, but by an influence that works constantly, but gradually and consistently, in the same direction, accompanied by an unending series of small, incremental gains spread out over a long period of time. Although influence of this kind does not draw attention to itself and may not even be noticed, it is much more effective than a sudden attack, because its constant presence becomes a part of the social fabric and ever-present background, that serves as a constant inducement. This kind of influence, however, because it is spread over a long period of time, requires that the man have a steady, clearly defined goal, which he adheres to unrelentingly. By unceasingly applying pressure, always in the same direction, the correct end result is achieved. If a man does not have the strength and endurance, or lacks the position to keep up this kind of unrelenting pressure, he must align himself with a powerful man, who is able to conduct such a campaign. This kind of endeavor requires great strength and a high level of persistence. If this is beyond the man's capacity, he must subordinate himself to a leader who possesses these characteristics. The maxim: it is vitally important that a leader share his thoughts, his goals, his hopes with the people he leads, and makes sure that they embrace them and understand them. If a leader does not explain himself, he cannot expect his people to pull together to accomplish the goals he sets. When everyone understands the goals, they are able to do things at their own level that will help further those goals, and everyone's individual effort will be pointed in the same direction. If people don't understand the goals, unforeseen events can upset them and cause them to become confused. But when everyone is prepared and all pull together, great deeds can be accomplished. 58. The joyous. The decision: a man with a joyous attitude attracts others to himself, and is able to exert great influence upon them. This enables him to unite with others in the performance of great endeavors, for men are delighted to enlist in a joint effort, when the coming together gladdens their hearts. This joy, that unites men together, is not based on silliness and frivolity, however, but on purity of intent, a sense of confidence, and the prospect for achieving success. When men are united together with the assurance of success in the pursuit of a noble and honorable goal, the feeling of joy becomes contagious. Such joyful feelings make success all the more certain, because they awaken a high level of enthusiasm and a willingness on the part of all participants to make extraordinary efforts to achieve the common goal. Joyousness, therefore, rests upon a firm commitment within, and a gentle and friendly manner without. Friction and animosity are completely unknown. Camaraderie and mutual assistance abound. Such an attitude is the basis for rightful action and the necessary ingredient for great success. Force and domination can sometimes obtain the appearance of success, but it is not a sustainable drive, and it eventually undermines morale. But when men are united by high spirits and enthusiasm, they make extraordinary exertions, and willingly endure all manner of hardships and sacrifices. The maxim: the best conditions for learning occur when there is an exchange of knowledge in a friendly environment between persons who are interested in sharing their views with one another. That kind of social interaction gives learning a vitality that makes it an engaging experience for everyone, and it enables participants to explore the hidden corners of topics that an individual might easily overlook when studying alone. The coming together of many different ideas and diverse viewpoints enables everyone to understand the extent to which concepts may be applied and used to explore areas that any given individual might otherwise avoid. This kind of learning becomes much broader, and much more integrated with an individual's total experience, than is the learning that occurs when a person is isolated from other learners. 59. Dispersion. The decision: people are brought together by dissolving the sentiments of individual, self-centered interest, that tend to make a man think only about his own concerns, and what will benefit him separate and apart from everyone else. Rather than being an expression of man's essential nature, self-centered interest is actually a block or deterrent to the full flowering of an individual's real nature. Man is obviously a social animal, and his highest development could hardly be reached apart from his fellow man. This inner relationship is depicted by ceremonies, both religious and civil, that involve large groups of people coming together to perform various sorts of ritual observance. These gatherings help impress upon the consciousness of man his connections and his interdependence with other men. The emotions aroused by these ceremonies reinforces the common heritage of the participants. It is through these kinds of collective activities that the myth of isolated individualism is dissolved, and people are able to work together to accomplish great undertakings, and achieve great social goals. Only a leader who has freed himself from a focus on self-interests can lead a people in that direction, however. If he thinks only of his own gain, or the profit obtained for his associates and supporters, he is already corrupt, and could never inspire others to be incorrupted. The maxim: all too easily, people fall into a mode of thinking that isolates them from their fellow man. Their selfishness and obsession with worldly possessions hardens their feelings towards one another, and they lose sight of the fact that we are all in the same boat. That in many vital senses, we all share the same fate, and we all can benefit if we will help one another. This tendency towards isolation can be overcome by religious devotion. By humbling themselves before the Supreme Deity, and realizing that their existence represents but a brief struggle in a creation extending over infinite time, they can join with their fellow men in worship and experience the fellowship of similarly situated men. 60. Limitation. The decision. The life of man is defined by its limitations. Without limitations, man would be without purpose, goals, or direction. Limits must be set on everything, to prevent excess and waste. Limits on expenditures establish economy and proper management. The limits on human activity determine the boundaries of morality and propriety in all its myriad forms. A superior man places limits on his personal interests, and this makes possible his loyalty to those above him, and his faithfulness to those below him. Limitations, therefore, are necessary for success in every area of human life. By learning to work within limitations, a man learns to manage his affairs in good times and bad. By keeping his expenditures within the limits of his income, a man can live without the pressing burdens of financial worries. The limitations imposed by nature tell a man which crops can be safely grown. Limitations imposed upon government officials prevent the adoption of excessive policies, while limitations placed upon the powers of government prevent the people from undermining their own welfare, by demanding programs that reach beyond the nation's fiscal capacity. Nevertheless, in all things limitations must be reasonable and held within bounds. Excessive limitations placed upon one's personal life create narrowness and deprivation. Excessive limitations placed on others restrict their development, and create resentment leading to rebellion. Limitations should contribute to the happiness of man, not to his destruction. The maxim: a man achieves success in his life by limiting his endeavors to a certain prescribed path. If he is unable to set goals and adopt clearly defined purposes, his activities will be without focus, and whatever he accomplishes will only be by accident. More likely, he will have no purposeful activities at all, and he will waste his time and substance in being tossed to and fro by whatever external currents happen to play upon him. If everything is a possibility for him, nothing becomes a likelihood. Limitations, therefore, define the man as a person and outline his character. Strength of character requires that effort be pointed in a chosen direction. A superior man finds liberation, not by escaping all duties and responsibilities, but by limiting himself to a chosen field of benefit. 61. Inner truth. The decision to experience the power of truth in his activities, a man must have an open mind, free of bias and prejudice. Through this power, he is able to exert great influence on others, for there is nothing stronger and more enduring than truth. When, therefore, a man is aligned with truth, he cannot be dismissed. His actions rest on the foundations of the universe itself. A person who acts in accord with truth is kind to others, because he knows the struggle that all have in finding and embracing what is true. He is respectful and receptive towards those who have a greater understanding of truth than himself, for he knows he has much to learn. Hence, there is no room in his character for arrogance. The knowledge of truth is infinite, and all her genuine seekers remain forever open to new discoveries. It is only through a united effort guided by truth that great works are possible. It is through the power of truth, therefore, that the development of all mankind is nurtured. When a man must lead difficult people, he must place absolute reliance on what is true. With a mind that is receptive and that harbors no judgments of others whatsoever, he must understand those he would lead and see, as it were, through their eyes. He cannot do this if he harbors even a single judgment or conclusion in his mind about them. At the same time, he must stand firm in his commitment to truth, and use his capacity to know truth, in order to bring those he would lead to the right path. When actions are thus grounded in what is true, even the most difficult problems can be overcome. That which is true leads invariably to that which is right. It is not the mere understanding of others, the mere experiencing of their point of view, that enables the superior man to lead. Deceitful men with evil intent act through similar understandings. It is by bringing the truth to bear on the understanding thus effected that he can exert a constructive influence. When a leader must judge the acts of others, he seeks an understanding that penetrates to their heart. Thus, the truth of the situation is brought to light and reality is faced squarely. Every situation has its own unique circumstances, and the superior man recognizes and addresses these, and makes them a basis for his judgment. The maxim, when a leader must judge the mistakes of others, he should seek an understanding that penetrates to their heart and appreciates the individual circumstances surrounding the occasion. Thus, the truth of the situation is brought to light and the moral reality is faced squarely. Every situation has its own unique circumstances. The superior man recognizes and addresses these, and makes them a basis for his judgment. In this way, he does not just focus on the violation of a rule, but rather upon an understanding of the offender and his moral responsibility. 62. Small preponderance. The decision a man of great modesty but of limited strength is not in a position favorable to leadership and great accomplishments. Nevertheless, he can be moderately successful if he takes certain precautionary steps. He should not attempt to embark upon any great enterprises, but should confine his activities to small projects that are within his means. A man of imagination can always envision great and noble projects, but it would be a mistake for a man with small resources to attempt such grandiose undertakings. It would be far better if he would confine himself to projects that can be accomplished easily with the resources available to him. Modesty and conscientiousness are always the key ingredients of the highest degree of success, but it is essential, when resources are limited, that modesty not become passivity and that conscientiousness not become pusillanimity. As a leader, the modest man must be careful to adhere to his inner strengths, and not allow himself to become a powerless figure, swept along by the surrounding forces. Modesty does not equate with being spineless and impotent. It is imperative, if the man is to accomplish anything at all, that he retain the dignity and authority of his position, and that he remain in complete control. His modesty and lack of strength only mean that he does not commence great tasks, that he remains cognizant of his lack of resources and capabilities, and that he does not anticipate great successes or notoriety. He is sensible of the reality that conditions are not favorable for anything but modest gains, so he maintains a low profile, and does not attempt any great reforms. The maxim: the superior man remains ever conscious of his duty to his fellow man. To the ordinary man, he may be seen as heavy-seeming, ponderous and overly serious. He is meticulous about things that others tend to ignore, and conscious of responsibilities that others tend to avoid. He is sincere in his attempts to empathize with those troubled in spirit, and always willing to help those in genuine difficulty. He is modest in his expenditures and unpretentious in his material possessions. This alone tends to differentiate him from other men. But in all things, he is content to live simply and with limited resources. 63. From old to new. The decision at a time of transition, when the old is being transformed into the new, everything seems to be in order, and to be coming along nicely. But it is at just such a time that great care is necessary. Because everything seems to be going smoothly, it is all too easy to relax and stop paying close attention. Since everything is going well, we say to ourselves, let good enough alone. Or if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Such maxims may sometimes be appropriate, depending on the circumstances. But when a man considers things in the context of change, he realizes that nothing remains steady, everything is in a constant state of flux. If it isn't broken now, it may well be after a brief period, and it may very well become so, if it isn't carefully attended to now. Remember the law that states that a system left to itself tends towards disorganization, not organization. Thus, when everything seems to be in order and approaching an optimum state of existence, it is at just such a time that an excessive movement can remove it from that optimum state, and introduce a tendency towards chaos. But it is also at just such a time that most men are inclined to divert their attention to things that need fixing, and it is through that kind of inattention that evil slips in unawares, that minor faults are overlooked, and that signs of decay are not noticed. A decline after reaching the pinnacle of success is a general rule affecting all things that exist in time. Nevertheless, this is not an absolutely inevitable rule. It may be avoided by expending great effort and exercising great care. The maxim just when things are going well is the time when something is likely to come along and disrupt the steady upward process. A wise man recognizes this fact, and does not assume that things will go well forever. It is at just such times, when other men are turning their minds to other matters, that the wise man increases his attention, and prepares for a reversal of fortune. Then, when the reversal comes, he is not taken by surprise, is already prepared for it, and is little injured by the ensuing decline. 64. Before completion. The decision work is nearing completion. The task of creating order out of disorder and chaos is almost finished. This is like drawing one great effort to a close in preparation for a new phase of life. It is difficult, because one must tie together the remaining loose ends of a great undertaking. But the likelihood of success is also great, because the end is in view and the efforts needed to bring it to a worthy conclusion are in evidence. Nevertheless, one must be extremely cautious. It is not a time for boldness. An error now could bring all previous efforts to naught. Too much is at stake, too much has been invested, to put everything at risk now. It is not a time to test new directions or methods, it is a time to complete carefully the plans and intentions that have guided you thus far. Finishing up a great task requires that one carefully analyze the remaining components, and properly assess their place in the completed whole. That view of the completed whole is possible now, so it is necessary to relate the unfinished portions to the completed structure, which can now be projected. This is not easy, because that relationship is not obvious and requires careful consideration. But if all these remaining elements can be put together in their proper order and relationship, the job will be finished. To do this, however, one must have a clear understanding and formulate a valid plan. The maxim finishing up a great task requires that a man carefully analyze the remaining components and properly assess their place in the completed whole. A view of the completed whole is possible now, so it is necessary to relate the unfinished portions to the completed structure, since all of it can now be projected. This is not easy, because the concluding effort requires careful consideration and precise control. But if all these remaining elements can be put together in their proper order and relationship so as to produce the desired result, the job will be finished successfully. To do this, however, one must have a clear understanding of the end result and